Okay, so how do Jehovah's Witnesses control information within the group, within the cult? So, first thing that comes to mind when I'm thinking about this is the fact that they have books or certain information that only certain people are allowed to know. So take for example, the Elders book. If you're an elder, it's the only time you're allowed to have one of those. Look at it, touch it. Yes, touch it. Sisters aren't allowed to touch the book, look at the book, whatever. Non-elders aren't allowed to touch the book or look at it. Yeah, if you're not at a certain level, you're not allowed to know the information. There's instructions for certain levels of people. Example, there's the circuit overseer instructions that leaked not too long ago. And it's not just the fact that they have instructions for those groups of people, but it's the fact that it contains information that's relevant for people who aren't allowed to be looking at it. So for example, the Elders book has information on, disfellowshipping, stuff like that, like what constitutes being able to be disfellowshipped, like different offenses, stuff like that, the process for the committees and things like that, and elders are the only ones who are allowed to look at it. Alright, so the second thought is deliberately withholding information. So, for example, most witnesses aren't aware of different child abuse cases that have gone on, the different fees that the Watchtower have had to pay as far as that, their donations are going towards these things, and they don't really know about it. The involvement with the UN, they didn't disclose that, and then when people found out about it, people were wondering about it, they immediately withdrew their membership, and they weren't very forthcoming about, when they released, and they talked about why, their excuses were as far as like they needed to use the library and they had to be a member to use the library and all this other stuff, and it just didn't seem very forthcoming. They withhold their financial information. They talk about needing donations and stuff like that, like the broadcasting where I think it was Stephen Lett, was basically begging for donations, talking about how, well, they didn't really have enough for what they needed and da-da-da, but he wasn't exactly specific with information as far as, this is how much we need, this is what we need it for, this is how much we're short. They were withholding the information as far as specifics and just, basically begging donations. And that's kind of the point, it's just that it's very vague. Yeah, so the next thing I think about as far as information is, this is kind of really getting into it, but anyway, so the next thing is not being allowed to look at non-cult sources of information. And this is something that Watchtower definitely encourages or discourages, however you want to put it, as far as for their members. The members are, you could say, encouraged or told, demanded to do all of their research just on the Watchtower library, which is basically the program that has only their approved sources and things that they've written and stuff like that. And even then, even on the Watchtower library, it itself is censored as far as how far back it goes, which publications you can access, and if you look at the online one, they do updates to the publications and stuff like that when things get altered. So it's not exactly, can't think of the word, but it's not exactly without censorship. Members have to look to Watchtower for all information, not to look to the media, things like that. They basically say the media is controlled by Satan, it's controlled by the devil, it's controlled by the world, and not to trust it. And it's highly discouraged to look outside of Watchtower for any kind of research, especially Bible research. It's discouraged to even look at like other, Bible scholars or things like that if you want to do Bible research. They're allowed to do that for their publications, but members aren't allowed to do that for their own information. So you're supposed to trust that whatever they extrapolate from their research, from the Bible scholars, things like that, is going to be 100% correct, or, whatever. You're supposed to trust them completely and not look for yourself. So the next big one is being forbidden from speaking with ex-members. So that's another way they control information, is by not letting people speak with, I say not letting, but it's highly discouraged. You can get in trouble for doing it. Speaking with former members. So-called apostates, so people who they consider an apostate is basically someone who no longer believes Watchtower, no longer, especially somebody who speaks out against it. They're vilified. They're called mentally diseased. That's a direct quote of something they call them, but they also call them deceitful. They're just called a lot of not very nice names. And basically members are told that if they listen to apostates, then, their spirituality is going to be ruined. They're not going to have a relationship with God anymore, things like that. It's fear-mongering. It's very, like, scare tactics, that kind of thing, as far as speaking with former members. But it's another way to control information, because if you speak to a former member, they might tell you, this or that, like, reasonings as far as why you shouldn't believe the cult information. This is a quote actually directly from Watchtower. Watchtower 2011, July 15th, page 11, says, "The Bible says apostates are mentally diseased and that they use their teachings to make others think like them." And then it says, "We do not speak to them or invite them into our houses. We also do not read their books, watch them on television, read what they write on the internet, or add our own comments about what they write on the internet." It's very clear. I mean, that's not one where they kind of beat around the bush or anything like that. Very clearly they don't want people talking to apostates. But yeah, they're told apostates are bitter, that apostates are going to lie to them. And, they're trying to control people. They don't want people leaving. When they find out information that's not exactly savory about the organization. Yeah, and not only are they discouraged from associating with former members, but also people who are just non-members in general, anyone who's not a Jehovah's Witness, discouraged from higher education. That's more information that they could receive that would kind of push them away from the cult a little bit. They would get information, just basically expanding your horizons, getting more information, that kind of thing. It's generally discouraged. Yeah. They also, another point is that they encourage members to confess sins, things like that. So, you're not really allowed to have any secrets, that kind of thing. And then once it's confessed, it can be used against you. So for instance, someone who confesses to being sexually assaulted, sexually abused, they could potentially receive a punishment for that, be blamed, they could be disfellowshipped, they could end up being shunned because of the fact that they were assaulted. They were a victim of a crime, and they can be punished for it. So that information is used against them, and that's another way, it's another kind of control and not being allowed to have, privacy. So basically, the question is, why does it really matter that they do that? But the point is they're controlling this information in order to keep people within the group. Once they can control what information you're taking in, it's a lot easier for them to control the person. If they keep them from talking to former members, keep them from looking outside the cult for information, keep them from going to college, it keeps a person's world very narrow, keeps their mind very narrow, and it makes it a lot easier for them to believe what they're being fed because the indoctrination kind of stays there. They're not exposed to anything outside of the indoctrination, and it makes it a lot easier on the leaders of the cult to keep their members and to keep all the benefits that they get from having a lot of members. So yeah, that's ultimately why that's important, and that's ultimately a lot of the ways, from my perspective, that that Watchtower controls information. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Try to keep this video a little shorter than the last one. Yeah, so thank you for watching.